What's your black hole of Star Trek now? Episode 307 of Trekland Tuesdays Live, in fact, with me, Dr. Trek Larry Nemecek, coming at you here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 with a side trip on a Trekland trek. Coming to you for some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in all things Star Trek. I'm going to swap things around a little bit and put the onus on you, but I think it'll be mostly not painful, because today's topic is it's taking stock, letting, as we say on Second Opinion, letting the dust settle for just a minute. There's been a lot of Star Trek cranked out, and a lot of adventure and storytelling and all that, but a lot of reassessments of where the Star Trek universe is. People wanted to go beyond Nemesis for so many years, and we've done that, even on the two animated series, and this one too. And then Strange New is filling in backstory that affects all of us. And Discovery is way out there in the future, but occasionally they reference something back. So I'm going to give you some time to work into this, because we'll do a couple of news updates just because we have to. A little bit of lately what's gone on the last week around here, but I want you to be thinking, everybody in Chatland, is there something that all the recent treks, probably climaxed by Picard, have left you wondering? And if so, let me know. Just really quickly, if you have not already seen them, I did a couple of lives, one on Facebook for the scene, but I interviewed a couple of our recent Discovery writers while they're on picket lines. This site was at Disney. There's sites all over LA and Southern Cal, and yes, in New York too. But of all of our Star Trek writers, almost none of them lived in Toronto or New York. Everybody was still LA based and dealt with the Toronto series, flying back and forth or just working from home in the pandemic or whatever. They're kind of re-gearing up again. And as I was mentioning last week and catching up with Aaron Walke over at Prodigy, the two animation series aren't technically affected by the current WGA contract and thus the strike. They're in the animation group tag, and they want to be in the SAG. That's their own thing. They want to be in the WGA, but they had a contract negotiation last year and made some gains, but they're not affected. So that's happening. So our live action shows, I talked last week, if you missed it, I'm going to do a summary also on Second Opinion here coming up, kind of just a capsule view. But if you did not catch episode 306 last week, I went through the writer's strike and the history and what's going on currently and the impact. In fact, I did it several days before everybody else jumped in on the bandwagon. And by the way, I saw there was a headline yesterday about Strange New Worlds delaying start of production yesterday. Just like I said last Tuesday, which is funny. Anyway, I just didn't spell it out obliquely because I wanted to, again, kind of soft pedal the sources. But yes. So that's happening with the strike. I went out Friday and I talked to Carlos Cisco, the self-styled Captain Cisco, who's a group captain over at the Disney Main Gate site here down in Burbank. But people are all over, and talked to Terry Burton and Eric Robbins. So you want to go check that out. Some of the newer writers who also came up the ladder as PAs. The two guys came up the ladder as a PA, then writer's assistant, and then writer, which is a whole incubation, which is a whole mentorship system that's under threat right now because of the explosion, what streaming has done, streaming in small seasons, and this almost like freelancer drift that things are changing into, which kind of blows up the whole culture of the whole nurturing world of writing and puts everybody at the mercy of a gig economy. That's one of the things they're fighting. That's out there. So that was interesting. There's been a topic pop up too, while you're all thinking of your questions about current Star Trek settling. There's been talk that if the strike goes this long, about the impact on Comic-Con. And maybe this is a topic for future if we see how things are flying. I'm getting mixed signals. Some of the writers I've talked to are thinking there will definitely picketing down at San Diego. What I can't get a handle on is if that would be picketing the entire convention, the whole San Diego Civic Center, Convention Center, plus the outlying panel sites, or if that would just be, say, picketing Hall H, because Hall H is where the studios present their big programs. Not so much in the smaller rooms, which, there's a lot of fan input here. Plus, it's not all TV and movies. Of course, there's comics, duh, and animation and games publishing and writers, prose writing. So a lot of aspects of Comic-Con's programming aren't there may be lots of sympathy, but they're not directly affected by the WGA strike, and that's a question that we may see rearing up, or other conventions. It's just that San Diego Comic-Con is the big, massive one that's close to LA that industry people would be involved with. I've asked that question. Would it just be Hall H? Would it be the entire convention? I've seen fans push back and say, hell yeah, I'll go down and walk a line. I've seen other fans say, wait, I've already spent thousands on my non-refundable airfare and my hotel. I don't want the thing to blow up because of that. What I enjoy is not affected by the WGA strike. So there's all of that. I've also seen a couple of writers go, oh my God, I just have to get to the next 2 weeks. That's July. That's the end of July. I'll wait. I'll worry about that later on. So there's something off on the horizon. And we've not been through that. We haven't had a writer's strike that overlapped the big summer cons, much less had a writer's strike in the era of the huge. For one thing, the 07 strike happened in November, December, January into February. Not height of con season, and much less when Comic-Con was on our radar. That exploded with Twilight, and that was just about the year 07, 08. It was just about the year Comic-Con exploded. But it wasn't the right time of year. So this would be the first time the Venn diagram of Comic-Con importance, in culture, and a writer's strike in the summer to begin with overlap. So we'll keep an eye on that. But that's something that's I've started to question folks about. But also, there are rumblings. If you remember, I've talked about it. I've shared shots. I will again, of theme pickets as the strike wore on, just to keep interest up and keep people excited. And in 07, 08, there were 3 or 4 theme pickets. One of them was a Star Trek theme picket because of how many writers were out there and how many sympathetic actors and other Hollywood union guilds were out there, crew people and so on. And there is starting to be talk of another one of those. So stay tuned. Nothing definite yet, but that's a glimmer in a few people's eye. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, the idea would be for this to settle up in a week or two and all of this concern be for naught, and people just get back to work. But that's not what's going to happen. I should also say one thing to clarify for the rest of the country. A lot of this is especially aimed at Netflix, who remember 10 years ago, you just ordered DVDs from Netflix. That's all they were, and you got them in the mail. 10, 15 years ago, that was Netflix. So they've been kind of the Johnny-come-lately, don't have a big steeped history dealing with the whole machinery of Hollywood. They're an original producer fairly recently. And that's true of all the other tech producers, Apple Plus and Prime and all that. But reading between the lines, a lot of the ire is directed at Netflix for pushing the industry and the industry model and the way everyone works, not just writers, in this direction. On one hand, gosh, there's lots of content. A lot of people would seem to be working, but it's really working half as much, twice as fast. That makes sense. Being paid for half as much, but demanded twice as much. And then the way that writers' rooms are nurtured along. And anyway, that's just an insight. That's just an insight. And a lot of people are giving up their streaming channels in protest for that, to try to, I don't think that's going to make a big dent in things, but that's been one of the ways that average fans are trying to show solidarity for now. But that's kind of the last week's rumblings. I intend to get back out and go visit some more of the writers live here in the next week or two. We'll get back and do that after the first week's gone down with a Trek focus, especially as we have so many Trek writers that no one's heard from, much less seen on camera, really. Maybe if you're following their Instagrams and their Twitter feeds, you might be a little bit familiar with what they look like. But that's kind of an undiscovered country, as it were. So that's in the cards for around here, even as we start to delve into the summer a little bit. But we're going to do a little earlier than usual today. I'm going to backlog and back scroll in the log and see what anybody's got for me. Hey, and maybe before we dive in, this is a good place to say I want to thank all of our Patreons. This is an update, yes. So, hey, thank you for the TTL Club. Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Justin Porteous, Glinda Bruton, Chris Jiggins, Pranakasha Productions, Comedy Forecast. Thank you for jumping in the Patreons. And Andrew Jasimski. And then, of course, our live wires. Robert McLean, Byron Bailey, J.R. Poole, Habjord Goodjohnson, Alan Hohensee, Dave Gregory, Tobias Rex, Donna S. Runyon, and Casey Shafsky. I want to thank you all for doing that. And as you know, I have a simple Patreon compared to a lot of folks. It's $5 and $10 a month. I set it up so folks could jump in and be supportive, and I do appreciate that. And we have gradually been spreading here. If you've been with us for the last 2 years or so, out of 6 coming up. Yes, 6 coming up. Don't tell anybody, but next week will be the 6th anniversary of Trekland Tuesdays Live. 6 goes back to when they said, Larry, just get on Facebook Live. Just get out there. Don't worry what it looks like. Just get out there. So anyway, I want to thank all the patreon.com/Trekland Live. It's about time to get the next wave of classic Portal 47 early years interviews with behind the scenes folks, backstage. That's what the $10 folk get. Everyone gets a shout out and my appreciation every week. And thanks a lot for that. Hope everybody's doing well again. And I'm going to dive in right now and we will see comedy. Have we heard any rumbling about official Trek cons coming back? Not Vegas. Not that I've heard. There might be. Here's the thing. You've got to find other companies on the scale of Reed. That's what the corporation wanted. Will some of the other convention companies out there, will they rise and go to the challenge? I think what CBS Paramount was looking for was a legit company, not a fandom owned and operated, from the roots up. And those companies are not a dime a dozen. They're not a dime a single. And that's kind of the loggerheads that things are at right now. Do the picket lines block non-writing staff from entering studios? No. In fact, there is at least one called a neutral gate at every site, and that's allowed to get supplies in for non-working people. But no, I mean, the work is going on in offices, etc. It's the creative places that are tied up. In fact, Friday, when I was at Disney, there was a tiny issue, and there's whoever the office folks, corporate, somebody inside is tasked with dealing with, they coordinate. It's kind of like somebody is sitting in the guardhouse at the Korean border, right? On both sides. It's like whoever the strike captain is that's out front has got a designated thing. In fact, that was Carlos the other day for his shift. There's a strike captain, and then there's at each site, at each shift, and then there's 1 or 2 assistant coordinators, whatever. Because there's a sign-in table. I signed in as non-union or from another union list, and then they had the strikers list over here. But they have donations of food and snacks from companies that want to support the picketers. So there's a shade tree there. They have, on the sunnier days, they've got, protectant, sunscreen. So but somebody the other day had ridden over on their bike and had tied their bike up on a little piece of fence between the drive-on gate, and there's lights going. There are a lot, like at Paramount, the famous front gate there where they picket. But here at Disney too, the front gate to Disney, not on Buena Vista, but on Alameda. And there's a light there, and the light changes, and the picketers obey the light. And so when when the cars would be turning in and out of that gate, they can come in and out. It's more of a conscious decision. And then, of course, as you listen to that video, you see all the traffic flying by, and probably 3/4 the cars passing are honking, and sometimes they honk very loudly. And almost all of the big trucks driving by are honking big time. That's a 4-lane street with a middle turn lane. No, but the other day, just while I was there, somebody had ridden over, chained their bike to a little piece of fence in between a pedestrian door and the gate the edge of the gate for the drive-through. And so the bike was longer than this, 4 or 5 foot section. So it was bumping out on either side. And at one point, somebody from whoever the coordinator from the corporate side, from the Disney side, came out and talked to Carlos about just finding the owner for the bike and moving it. So because it was sticking into the 2 gates, not to be, and it was very polite and everything was cordial. And it wasn't them trying to be weird. He said, well, he says, they just didn't want a lawsuit if somebody gets hurt. Or if there's a wreck or something. So, and that was like, so that's kind of the level of, it's not quite to red phone level. So there is that. It's not this pitched, at least where I saw. Now, I saw a site in New York City at a strike section where a show that had not been I want to say Deadpool at one of the smaller, one of the series that had not intended to they had their scripts written. Now, unlike Strange New Worlds, which has shut down for people not wanting to cross lines and also not being able to have writers make page changes as they shoot, which happens if you don't want the quality of the writing to suffer as you get along, or as you have to make changes due to somebody suddenly not being available and you have to juggle characters. Lots of reasons. But that's what Rainbow scripts are as shows are shot. So Strange New Worlds shut down production. There are some productions that are trying to go on and shoot, depending on the nature. One such show in New York was going to proceed and shoot. And a bunch of Teamsters sympathetically showed up to block the gates. And now they can't get freight and they can't get in. And they're having to shut down the show and they weren't planning to. So there's old school union striking tactics there in play. So I'm sure little flare-ups are happening around, and I've saw some chatter if you follow some of the accounts of people. There was a big meeting on the second day night, Tuesday night last week, or Wednesday night last week. There was a big combined WGA and leaders from SAG, from Directors Guild, from IATSE, from the Teamsters, all met in kind of a big unity meeting and talked to the mainly writers, but to their leadership of all those unions talked. And I saw it reported in people's socials. I don't know that I saw a news story about it, but then I never looked. But it just dawned on me that that's a big out of the gate on the end of the second day. Here's where we stand. So to answer your question, there's at least one gate where people can get in. A lot of times the drive-throughs aren't affected at all because the picketers are observing the traffic lights. The story I told you from New York was apparently not a light and was a blockable gate. And I don't know what the next chapter, if somebody came out and made peace about that, or if they're still stuck not shooting. This was not a trek, but if they were still not shooting when they intended to be shooting. Okay, Cairo, do I think the Strange New Worlds Lower Decks crossover will be somewhat like that Phase 2 episode discussed in Trek Files today, after all the 2D animated people are crossing over into the 3D live action world? No, I think the joke of that pitch, and hey, everybody, go check out Trek Files today. I think the pitch, the whole point is to be that. I think the crossover Lower Decks Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks does not exist in a 2D world. We don't see the Lower Decks characters turn end to end and just see them as a skinny line, and then they're popped out. Lower Decks is displayed in a 2D world, but they don't inhabit a 2D world. So Strange New Worlds is displayed in a 3D world. Prodigy is displayed in a 3D world. So that's just our media. But the story people are all, fleshed out. Otherwise, Tom Paris would have suddenly become two-dimensional. Plate or no plate. Otherwise, Quark and Kira would have suddenly become two-dimensional. So, spoilers, the joke is all in our head as a viewer, but it's not part of the storytelling. Here's an interesting thing. Why did Starfleet want fleet formation given how Borg-like it is? Well, hindsight's wonderful, isn't it, Zahir? See, it's the miracle of technology and coordination. But it's a metaphor for our times, I think. It's like, how do you exploit the strength? How do you exploit the strength's one weakness? I was kidding about the torpedo tube down the maintenance shaft, but it's kind of the same thing. But think about what they must have been smarting from. Was it maybe a reaction to the synth attack on Mars? What were the perceived weaknesses coming out of that? Had something happened between 2285 and 2401? You know what I mean. Picard Century and New Century, not Kirk Century. Disney cast members, as in theme park character actors and employees, yes, had their union disputes over wages earlier this year, and it went on for way too long. At the end of it all, they got what they wanted, but Disney certainly didn't give in immediately. Well, yeah, part of this is the classic old school, we'll just wait you out because I'm older and I have better insurance. Talking to Aaron Walker, who reminded me that the whole reason animation writers aren't with WGA is because Uncle Walt just had them denigrated to story people. There were the drawing people and the story people, and they were all, and because he's animating, 3-minute cartoons, and it's denigrated anyway. The whole reason there's a quantum generational drop-off in animation writing, which the world is kind of intruding upon now, and the changes in media and cartoons are not just 3-minute theater or Saturday morning quickies. And interestingly enough, Fox Network for the prime time for Simpsons, for American Dad, they're on SAG scale. And Disney's purchase of Fox has put pressure on new primetime half-hour animation to just go on the tag scale, which is a quantum leap down from 20% lower or more. I need to check that. Question: where is Admiral Janeway at this time? She's off somewhere. She's definitely there and mentioned because she was part of Seven's admission into Starfleet in just the last year or so, in between season 2 and season 3. She's in the sound booth recording her Prodigy lines. That's where she is. Showing up for her statue ceremony in Bloomington. Why does Wesley never, boys, here you're just cranking them out. Why does Wesley never visit his mother, or his father for that matter, since he apparently can now? What is it Beverly said? Space claimed him. I lost him to space. What was that line? Because he's off doing busy traveler stuff. I don't know. Maybe it's because now he knows he's got a half-brother and he feels awkward. That's a question I'm wondering if Terry or somebody else has put. I know they've been asked about Wesley. Hey, Mike, the real black hole is the friends we made along the way on Prodigy and Lower Decks, and whether Frontier Day killed them on screen for extra drama points. How can 399 ships be the entire Starfleet? Well, I think they're starting to say that they're obviously not. There are some pulled in from out the border. 399? I thought it was more like 330 or something. Visual Effects Sean told me that they started with about 380 ships. And then, of course, I knew it would happen. I just didn't think Jorg would get on it as fast. I started to do what Jorg did, and I thought, this is going to take hours. I don't have hours. But he came up with what, like 329 or something, I thought. Anyway, but Terry and such, Dave Blass, have been talking about how it's not the entire fleet. People are being hyperbolic, exaggerated when they say, oh, the whole fleet's going to be there. Well, they mean a chunk of the fleet, or like more than have ever been assembled in one place before, which could be very true, but not the entire, like they're going to leave the borders unguarded kind of thing. But for once, the Enterprise was not the only ship in the sector, much less the quadrant. That's a question, though, about the Prodigy and Lower Decks characters. Did any characters we have met in the 80s, 20 years later, no longer be with us? See, one of them's going to go to Boreth and have a future vision that they're not going to make it out of Frontier Day 250. I have many questions about the changelings. Even though this was a small bit, did they infiltrate the Klingons or the RSE or even the RFS, the Romulan Free State, or just the Federation? My guess is they did. I'm tired of this Huvan chauvinism. I'm tired of this Federation chauvinism. I want everybody to be treated equal. I think there should be changeling infiltration, but the Klingons were paranoid already. And the Romulans are fractured now. It's like, well, great. This is all we have to deal with. We're already in pieces, and now we've got changelings. Why does Jack Crusher the Younger have a pic of his parents in 1990s formal wear? See here, you don't know. There's a big pendulum swing in everything. Fashion goes around and comes around. There's a decade there where all the fashion in the Federation actually used the fabric side it was intended for. And upholstery fabrics were way out of style for a while. Actually, they were just coming off the holodeck from an historical period 1990s piece. It was Dixon Hill Jr. Mike McDevitt, is Frontier Day too Earth focused to the point of insensitivity? Sure, we like Archer, but lots of non-Earth people made Warp 5 ships with their bare hands or whatever. Celebrate the Federation, not one dude. I know that when I realized that's what Frontier Day was, frontier is still a word that to me it's like Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone stuff, which is very American, much less very human-centric. And in many people's eyes, problematic. So that's the whole, now space, the final frontier here comes from Space, the Final Frontier. It's a Zephram Cochrane quote now, as it's been retconned. So what can be so horrible about that? They're sitting there thinking, what can we do? They knew it wasn't time to celebrate, say, Federation Day, 2161. Do they want to advance the calendar up 10 years and have it be, 61 to 11? 2511, which was floating out there for a bit, I think. Yes, this is right, Scott. Will has said he has a headcanon bit about not visiting his old people now. A lot like the Trill rules against, although Dax totally blew those out of the water when Jadzia went right back to associating with Curzon's best friend, which makes no sense. Wesley would like nothing more than to visit his mom and meet his brother, not seeing them as a sacrifice he has to make in service of something so much bigger than anything else in this reality. How old is Mariner during season 3 of Picard? Would she succumb to the Borg, or would she just get the mother of all headaches? We figured this out at some point, because she's far more deceptively older than you think she is. She's one of the world's oldest ensigns. She's trying to out-ensign Harry Kim. She's close to 30 as an ensign, isn't she? Because Armina, her academy classmate, is a captain, but she's in her early 30s, if not mid-30s. So by the time of this is 20 years later, she's in her 50s by this time of Picard. That's just some back of the envelope, back of the napkin scratching there. People wishing the Titan A was renamed the Picard. Well, yes, it is. In fact, there are one or two ships that got named. Dave Blass has shared with me, where they went, oh, we just said that person is no longer alive. So it was like a for real thing. Took all. So now they're backpedaling on this. But that's one of the. But the other thing is, they just wanted to have an Enterprise as a potential hero ship again, because it had been 2 or 3 iterations. That was the main thing. They just wanted to have a hero ship be Enterprise again, after showing that it didn't have to be to lead a series. What are you saying here, Melanie? Fashion, the original miniskirt uniforms were current with the mods Go-Go Air mid-60s. So Next Gen has a lot of fashion from the late 80s and 90s, hairstyle and clothing. I know. In fact, miniskirts were radical because you were telling those old white guy designers that you didn't care what they said. You were young and in control of your own clothing, and you were going to be radical. Pavel Chekhov have married Irina Galyulin. My mind has been stuck on Anton Chekhov's Russian accent, trying to make some headcanon sense of it. Yeah. Well, Anton Chekhov, he had over the centuries, he turned it on when he wanted to imitate his father. And speaking about long-lived, but McCoy was 137 50 years before this. This is a thing, Diana. Hey. So Dr. Girardi, Borgrati, was from an alternate timeline. Remember? She's from the future and came back into this one, and that's why she's still holding forth as a friendly sub-member of the Federation guarding that vortex portal, which to me I get very nervous about. Somebody should go back and check on that. The Borg Queen we see here is there was always a vagarity about, did Janeway beat a section of the Borg? Were there other far-flung? Was that the Queen that really communicated with everybody, and it's amplified across, a quadrant and a half? And so we kind of come back to, and there was a lot of, with different actresses played. So we kind of come back to, that was the Borg Queen in just very small state and diminished state. And yeah, Janeway really did screw up the collective big time. But the ones we saw, the one at the end of season 2 had nothing to do with the one we just saw again. And that's a very easily answered And they were up on top of that at the beginning. Why did nobody see the Borg ship parked in Jupiter? Well, it was inside Jupiter's red spot. Was she running shields? If Jupiter Station is still there, that's some hiding. Hey, Duralta, on the topic of rainbow scripts, is every color designated with a certain draft? So what's red? The first, the last? Well, there is no red because that's too dark to reproduce. No, there is a certain color wheel and they're in order. And I used to be able to say them: blue, then pink, then yellow, then green. That's the first 4. And that's the most common ones. And then if you get to the end of the cycle, you are, there's salmon and buff and green tint, which is light green. Yeah, there's one that's orange, but it's not called orange. That may be salmon. But there are 10. And when you go through those 10 colors, then you go back to white. White is technically the first color, although people don't think about it that way. But when you run all the way through the color wheel, then you go back to white, and then blue, pink, yellow, green, and on and on. If you've been in Portal, we've talked to all the script coordinators, including, assistant script coordinator Janet, and we have pictures, and I've got pictures of Janet with a big stack of blue pages, and by the time you're in production, when you're in draft mode, the only people seeing it are the writers and main producers. And then anybody that needs to be budgeting, like maybe the production designer who needs to start thinking about what they need to do for sets. But by the time you're in production, everybody, 150 people are getting those copies. Now, that's altered in the digital era, and you can just send PDFs digitally. So that's saved a ton of paper there and put many a studio print shop out of business. Look, okay, you lurker. Yeah. Well, the color, and their color, if they're still the same way, they asterisk the line with the change in it, so you can instantly see what was the change. And then they're all dated, and the title page is issued new, so you can see what you're up to, so you're not missing something. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Bid him welcome. I think that's done us for today. But thanks, everybody, for being here, and thanks for jumping in. And once again, planning this idea, if you're coming to LA for business or pleasure, want to do something truly unique, we can make your own customized away mission. Go to 4 sites, location sites, including Paramount Pictures, which is a special day plan, but we can do that. But I will be hosting you around. We'll pick you up at your hotel, take you back at the end of the day. We'll have a fast food lunch in the middle of the day so we can spend most of it. But I plan on 6 hours with you. Trekland Treks, you pick out the places with my help. We'll coordinate it. It's a lot of fun. I do have planned days, and some of them I think we're going to be announcing soon if you want to come. The way I did with the cruise folks, we'll do a set schedule for a group. But I'm talking about one just for you and your party of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. TreklandTreks.com. Check that out. And yeah, the Trek Files is up again this week. Over on Facebook is where the docs are, but you can find the audio anywhere fine podcasts are caught. We are back with, yes, it's Ben Robinson again. We found a bizarre, listen, folks, a phase 2 story bought and pitched that's never been cataloged anywhere else. So an all new glimpse at phase 2, but it was not put into motion for script in the original order of 13 scripts. The 2-hour pilot, which became motion picture, and the 11 stories beyond that, this is not one of those. So Ben Robinson, late of the great Small Ships of Eagle Moss, joins me to geek out about it and speculate. And it's got the most bizarre concept you've ever heard. You want to catch it on the Trek Files this week. Otherwise, around the horn, hey, it's at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, Larry Nemecek's Trekland here on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit the bell and all this YouTube stuff. Love to have you with us on Instagram as well. And Facebook too, obviously. And portal47.net, your mini-con all year long, no matter where your center seat is. You want to be there with us. In fact, if you're in the Patreon and you want to, you could put more money in on Patreon, or you could just come join us in Portal 47. It's a great community. We've got a lot of Portal 47ers here. A week from tomorrow, will be our European in midday. So our roundtables, the Ask Dr. Trek roundtables, actually have room for the Europeans. And speaking of Dave, I want to give a shout out to Dave. Dave and Liz Kosklowski were our guests last month, talking all things updating on season 3 Picard that just aired. So they're posting a lot on the socials. I always urge everybody to go post, to follow all your creatives on their Instagram and their Twitter and their Facebook. The writers are doing that right now and giving you the experience from the lines as they can, and keeping the intent alive. So we're doing all that. I have a special coming up Saturday this month, not this Saturday, but a week from Saturday on the 20th. Saturday the 20th, the latest monthly the Hailing Frequencies Open sessions from the new Nichelle Nichols Foundation. I am very thrilled, excited, and honored to be on their advisory board. And I'm going to host an interview panel. A panel is more than one person. This idea that panels are solo things, that's a spotlight hour. That's a Q&A. A panel is a panel discussion. You need at least 2 people for a panel. But this is going to be a solo. In the spirit of Nichelle and their personal shared friendship and work history, I'm going to be doing an interview hour, a spotlight hour with none other than the great Walter Koenig. So Walter and I are going to have an hour. It's me talking to him, but all things about Nichelle, their friendship, their focus, their years together, him telling stories about her, his memory of things that she did in and out of the show, and any time along the ways that he tried to support her or the way she tried to support him. So that's going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on that. It's at our old Life Support Live hour, now that I think about it. So if you used to tune in for Life Support Live with Dr. Ali, I'm going to be at that same hour a week from Saturday on the 20th with Walter. It's the latest in the Nichelle Nichols Foundation Hailing Frequencies Open speaker series. It's one of the first things we're doing at the foundation before we build up the scholarship fund enough to be able to reward young people across the spectrum and support them in everything that Nichelle would have wanted to do. Space and communications and understanding and diversity and small business and women's issues and people of color, and just making the future as bright for as many people as we could, which is what Nichelle was up for. That's coming that day. So I will talk about that next week again. Other than that, gang, thanks so much for joining us here Tuesday again. Hey, please, as we continue to repopulate the world with our bodies, please stay healthy, do all the things. Something that has not evaporated is the crazy that's out there. So please stay woke. Check the sources when you come across interesting media bits. Beware on the blue checks of Twitter. That's all I can say. Yeah. And trek well, everybody.